You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Wow, what a program we have today. In the wake of Easter, originally a pagan fertility holiday, hence the persistent symbols of rabbits and eggs, but now a hefty religious season, well, in the wake of that, we have Angela Bonavoglia as our guest with her witty critique of the new pope. Then dynamo feminist theorist and activist Brittney Cooper talks about black feminism, the Crunk Collective, and what happens to black women when black men take center stage. Last, the so far only male guest ever invited to appear on this program, an exclusive, explosive interview about why feminism is the politics of the 21st century. Former President Jimmy Carter. But first we need to look inside the headlines. I am just hyperventilating with fury this week about some stories that have been in the headlines and some that have been inside them. Two that have been in the headlines in a major way. I'm sure you're familiar with Cliven Bundy, who is the rancher out west, who has refused for 20 years to pay for his cattle to graze on U.S. land. He's a welfare king, you could say. And in being confronted, took up guns to defend his rights, and then, in process, offered a nostalgic ode to the glories of the slavery institution, how good that was for black people. And then he was soon followed in short order by Donald Sterling, who is the owner of the Clippers, thus sending the NBA into paroxysm, because they'd known for some time that he was an obnoxious racist. His real estate holdings had been sued for denying people of color residence, and he had also had a number of lawsuits from managers who were people of color. And there were sexual harassment lawsuits in there as well. What a surprise. So he was caught on tape saying toxic things about race. And here, let's pause for a minute, by the way, and give a shout out of praise to a woman who was his mistress who taped him, named, we think, V. Stiviano, on the tape, identifies herself as mixed race, Mexican and African American, and argues with him over his racism. And then she outed him on the tape. So you go, V. Stiviano, if that's your name, or whatever your name is. By the way, some people are very critical of her for having taped him without his knowledge, which is a criminal act in California. And I'm wondering, where are the great defenders of the so-called heroes Edward Snowden and Julian Assange? Or is there a double standard for whistleblowers, and it's one thing if you're a white boy? In any event, so there's those two. And then, in terms of sexism, there's two Republicans. One, Det Bowers, who is an evangelical minister. He's 62, and he is challenging Lindsey Graham in the South Carolina GOP Senate primary. And he believes that 95% of broken marriages are caused by women giving more attention to their children than to their husbands. You see, I mean, he chose you. The husband chose you. The children didn't. And this is an abominable idolatry. So then there's him. And then he's joined by another GOP member, this time an elected lawmaker, a New Hampshire state representative, Will Infantine. Honest to God, I did not make that name up. Who, in opposing a bill that's up before the New Hampshire House for equal pay for women, opposed it, explaining that the pay gap between men and women stems from the fact that men just work harder. They take riskier jobs, and they're more motivated than women, and women are basically lazier. So that's good to know. Now, what I am obsessed with, I'm trying to ungrit my teeth here so I can speak clearly. What I'm obsessed with is a couple of things. One, when the next time we read or we hear somebody say that we're in a post-racial and post-sexist society, are we going to cite these four troglodytes as examples that, in fact, They are not anomalies. It is more common than one would think. This is all over the place. This is the hidden aspect of racism and sexism that's not even so hidden. It's right out there in daylight. 2, will we admit that we have basically for 45 years been lifting the rock out from which these people are now crawling? And there's some progress in that, nauseous as it makes us. And last, fascinatingly, all 4 make a point of saying, but I'm no racist, but I'm no sexist. Now, what do they think racism is? What do they think sexism is? Do they think somebody has to be lying, bleeding and dead at their feet, killed by their hand, in order for a racist or sexist act to have been committed? Literally, Bundy and Sterling and Bowers and Infantine they don't think that they're sexist or racist. So somehow they've got the message that the label is bad. They're not even as honest as those groups that are, the white Aryan patriots of God or whatever they're called, who proudly say with some honesty, hey, we're racist. Damn right. No. These people have got the message that racism is a bad thing to be, and sexism is a bad thing to believe in. So if they've got that, does that mean there's hope for them? Or are they just totally awash in their own toxic hypocrisy? I don't know, and I'm too blind with fury right now to be able to see. And now for our first guest. Angela Bonavoglia is an author and an award-winning journalist whose work has been published in such outlets as Ms., The Nation, Salon.com, Redbook, Newsday, The New York Times, and many more. She blogs at the Huffington Post, and her most recent book was called Good Catholic Girls: How Women Are Leading the Fight to Change the Church. Welcome to the program, Angela.
Thank you, Robin.
The piece that you did recently for Huffington Post on a to-do list on women for the Pope was both meaningful and absolutely hilarious. I started when I saw it, and then saw the point number 1 was plaintively, please stop talking about the role of women in the church. I thought I was going to burst and roll on the floor. How did you come to write this, and why? How can we get it in everybody's hand so that they can read it and laugh and say yes?
Oh, well, thank you. I'll answer the second part first. It's up on the Huffington Post, so anybody can just look up my name, Angela Bonavoglia, and Pope Francis, and it will pop up. And the reason I wrote it, actually, Robin, was I was watching very carefully and closely this new Pope, and from the moment I saw him step out at St. Peter's and ask the crowd to bless him before he blessed us, and I felt myself through the television there, I was really, really moved. There was just something so human about that, and humble, and I felt immediately kind of drawn to him, and so I began to watch what he was saying and what he was doing, and there were many things that he said and did that really, really struck me and made me very, very happy. He is eloquent on poverty. He is a moving and passionate defender of the poor. In his paper that he released last year on the joy of the gospel, he just came down really, really hard on trickle-down economics, on the notion that somehow the riches of the rich will make their way to the poor. And he called on people to really regain empathy, compassion, and to make sure that people have food and that they have jobs and education and so on. He talked about the church as the people of God, which was not just the clerics. He talked about the clerics being in many cases arrogant and out of touch with the people.
Right.
He said a lot of things that really, really moved me. And one other thing that he said, which was that the Eucharist, which so many priests and bishops around the country had been depriving Catholics of because they were pro-choice, he said the Eucharist is not a prize for the perfect. I thought, this man has something special to
That's
say.
very different,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, very different. And then there was that plane ride where someone brought up the subject of homosexuality, right?
Right.
And he said, who am I to judge? So I thought, these are some really good things. And then I started paying attention to what was going on with women. And sad to say, it wasn't changing.
Yeah.
And so I came to this piece with this wanting to connect with him and with what he was trying to do, but also wanting to lay out, here are the issues. Please, please rethink these issues. Open your eyes. Look at them more directly. And that's how it came to be, and that's how I tried to write it in that spirit.
Well, it's a wonderful 10 points. I mean, not being a Catholic, you being the best Catholic I could ever know, in continual feminist war with the church, and have written so brilliantly about that so many times. But I, not being a Catholic, certainly was warmed by his persona, all the things that you said, a little paranoid, because it's the church after all,
right.
And and thinking to myself, it's all very well, the Liberation Church was great on poverty as well, but not so much on women. So then I'm reading these 10 points. This was after the nuns on a bus went all around the country and then got in trouble for doing that. And they're wonderful points, to recognize women's God-given moral authority. The confessional should be a place of mercy, not a torture chamber. And as long as you can say, who am I to judge about homosexuals? What about abortion? You've got that right in point two.
Right. It's one thing to say she's regretting her abortion and we'll give her forgiveness. But what if she's not? What if she knew it was the right thing to do?
That's right.
That is such a blind spot.
And then three. I just thought, you go, girl. Study feminist theology. This is
theology.
This is like, Your Holiness. What we need is for you and your brother prelates to stop demonizing leading Catholic feminist theologians. Heed their words. For example, that of Sister Fordham's, Sister Elizabeth Johnson, who has been censured by the U.S. bishops for daring to highlight biblical passages where Jesus portrays God as female. Take that, Your Holiness. I mean, this is amazing. Number 4, bless the use of contraception. Oh my God, Angela. 5, leave behind the virgin birth. And 6, appoint a woman to the College of Cardinals, which of course would change the entire place with one stroke of a pen.
Right.
End compulsory celibacy. 8, hold your brethren accountable. And there's wonderful paragraphs under each one. And then 9, no more meetings about women without women.
And that we have been saying that for decades now, and they still do it.
It's absolutely, it's incredible. And then this is a wonderful thing when you quote your mother, that your mother was a Catholic in revolt, but a private, quiet revolutionary, unlike you, and she always saw beyond your anger and kept advising you, don't let them keep you away. And then you say, she meant you, Your Holiness. I mean, oh my God, this is, and you end this thing with saying that that you realize he's taken to calling people who write him. And if he would like to call you, that would be good, because unlike the nuns who weren't home that he tried to reach on New Year's Eve, you're usually there. So this is just wonderful. This is like a blueprint, if only. If only, really. It's got to be, I guess at this point it's got to be really done one at a time, because one of these issues at a time, because there is just so much education to still be done. With from the Pope on down, with the men who run the church. Well, what do you think, literally? I mean, do you think that there are chances of this being more than a cosmetic, feel-good presentation that repositions the church? I mean, clearly he is somewhat more than cosmetic, but not so far where girls are concerned. No, and not, well, on the subject of women, he has said no women's ordination, but he has talked about, are there other ways that women could be involved? We'll see how much that actually opens the door. I don't hold out a lot of hope for that.
there's just such a long way to go.
And
And I guess the other piece is the abuse piece. I mean,
yeah,
he
of course.
did say something recently that was very, very upsetting.
Yeah.
It was, it was in an interview with that Italian daily. It was, in fact, in March. He said that the church has done so much on this issue of the cases of abuse, and is perhaps the only public institution to have acted with transparency and responsibility,
Oops.
which is stunning remark.
And,
and it's arrogant and insensitivity.
Real bad.
He's trying to change the Vatican. He's making changes
Yeah.
at that level of who's in charge and whose voices are being heard. It's a long road. He couldn't come out tomorrow and make huge changes. I mean, with the subject of divorced Catholics, he seemed to be very open. There seems to be an opening now to find a way to bring divorced Catholics back into the fold and allow them access to the sacraments. If you wanted to be a little less than generous about it, I mean, the reality is there are so many divorced Catholics now that if you want people in the pews, you're going to have to open some of those doors.
Yeah, some of these decisions are looming as practical necessities. I mean, people,
Exactly.
If you want to have a church at all, you've got to get Catholics back, and because Catholics are having none of it. I mean, isn't it something like 70% of Catholics in the United States use some form of contraception?
Oh, it's not. It's over 90%.
Over 90.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Over 90.
And the same brain drain and persona brain drain is happening with the clergy, with nuns, with priests. They don't have enough people to be in the pews or preach to the pews. So something's got to give.
Something's got to give. Absolutely. And I think I'm going to write him another letter.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for writing this, and thank you for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin. It's been great talking to you.
We have to take a short break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I am Robin Morgan. We'll be back in just a minute with Brittney Cooper of the Crunk Collective, one of the smartest, gutsiest feminist voices on the web, or anywhere else for that matter.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Brittney Cooper is completing her first book. She's an assistant professor of women's and gender and Africana studies at Rutgers, and her work is focused on studying Black women's organizations as the sites for the production of intellectual thought and on Black female public intellectuals. And she is a co-founder, along with Dr. Susanna Morris, of the Crunk Feminist Collective, a feminist of color scholar activist group that runs a very successful blog. Brittney, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with the Crunk Collective, of which you're a founder, and for which you blog. Crunk, as I understand it, is this wonderful word which means sort of happy chaos. It's based on a particular kind of rap. It's based on being high and happy and chaotic and making good trouble. Am I very wrong? Tell us.
No. Yes, you're very right, actually. So I like to think of crunk as like sort of conjugation of cranking. So when things are crunk, that means they're all the way turned up, which is also the name of a pretty popular Southern rap song. And so we like to think of crunk feminism as feminism at the highest power, or feminism all the way turned up. So it's definitely happy chaos and happy trouble.
I like it. I like it
Yes.
a lot. And you, of course, blog very popularly for the collective. The collective is really become a major outlet for Black feminist intellectual thinking online, and activism too.
Yes. When we created the collective, we wanted to make sure that we were having conversations that matter to us and that they weren't just happening in the academy, because we know that most Black women are not in the academy and have differential kinds of access to academic spaces. So we think feminism is relevant for all women's lives, and we wanted to be able to reach those women and to have them reach us and be in community with them. And so blogging provides an opportunity to do that in a really unique way. And so it's been remarkable to see the kind of community we've been able to create among young women of color online.
It's huge. I find, and I don't know, this may just be who I'm following, but I said this to Lavia Ajayi and to Dr. Goddess. I find the most energetic and interesting feminist thinking going on online, which is where young feminist thinking is going on, is in the Black community.
Right. Yeah. It's so interesting. But I think one of the things about that, because we've thought about that a lot too, is I think that online spaces, there's a lot to be said for limitations, but I think they're democratizing spaces. And I think what's so interesting, it sort of reminds me of this moment from Bell Hooks, right, that in this book she is talking back where she says, Black women's journey has never been from silence into speech. We've always been talking. That doesn't mean people have always been listening. And so now I think that blogging provides folks an ear to the conversations that have always been going on in our communities. And now we have a medium that is not prohibitive, that we can sort of broadcast those conversations.
Yeah, that's very true, because even years ago when the F word, feminism, was still so much a no-no. Not that it's wildly acceptable today, but much more so. But back when people were saying, "Well, I'm no feminist, and it would drive you crazy, it would make you nuts, because then everything that would come out of their mouths after that, of course, would be feminist. But the use of feminist and various related words like womanist, the use of feminist among Black women was higher always than among white women. And now I find the use of feminist among younger women online and off higher than among my generation. And I'm so delighted at that. I mean, it's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. I mean, and I think we're still fighting that battle. When I teach college kids or, go around and do work as part of the collective with high school students, they're always like, well, what's this feminism thing? And sort of, what are you talking about? But I think that they are, the good thing is that they have access to blogs, not just the CFC, but like the F-Bomb, right, which is Julie Zellinger's blog,
right.
Where the sort of generational conversation is happening.
That's right.
So that's pretty cool.
You blog for the collective as Crunktastic,
that's right.
which I love, right. Which I love, which is not your usual assistant professor of women's and gender studies and Africana studies, usual representation of herself. So I love it. But also just recently, you write for Salon and lots of other places. And just recently you did a piece for Salon, which I read and I thought, oh my God, what a brilliant, nuanced, careful, thought through piece. And it is going to get her into such deep doo-doo. This was the one, Black Girls, Zero-Sum Struggle, Why We Lose When Black Boys Dominate the Discourse. And it was an answer to Obama's special program for young African-American men, My Brother's Keeper.
Right.
And you wrote these lines, which I was so moved by. These are alarming times. Over these many months, I've watched the failure to convict Trayvon Martin's and Jordan Davis's killers. I'm worried because I know when African American boys are being killed with impunity by white people, this triggers every kind of deeply held race trauma African Americans have. We circle the wagons. We fight fiercely to protect our beloved boys. We demand their right to grow into men, and we should. The thing is, this we is mostly African American women doing the fighting, the organizing, the praying, the rearing, the fussing, the protecting, the loving, and the losing. Black women have always been their brothers' biggest and best keepers, but when Black men occupy space at the center of the discourse, Black women lose critical ground. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, those were tough lines to write. And you're right, got me into a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
I mean, it's,
you think?
yeah, I mean, it's often when I'm doing feminist work and a lot of the conversations we've been having in online feminism are about dealing with racism within the women's movement, ongoing sort of issues. And sometimes when I'm ready to throw in the towel and just say, let me kind of be a full-fledged race woman and just deal with race issues, then these kind of moments come up, and I'm reminded that there's, that there is no dismantling these systems of racism, right, without a strong critique of patriarchy, and
that's right.
And so when I wrote that piece, just seeing the reaction from Black men, the sort of fear, right, the sort of anger from them about the idea that Black women would advocate for ourselves, or that we matter too, or that, that they owe us any level of political solidarity. The sort of resistance to that was pretty tough to take. And, and I almost feel like sometimes we're relitigating the same battles. And so that we were, talking about when I read stuff from the 1970s, and I'm like, well, why are we still here? And why is this so hard? And why is we see feminism catching on among young people, particularly young women of color?
Yeah.
But we really need to see it catching on among young men of color too.
Yeah. To write that kind of piece and have it have the wide audience that it had, Brittney, would not have been possible before. And that's a huge difference. Talk a little bit about the book that you've been working on, Race, Women, Gender, and the Making of a Black Public Intellectual Tradition, 1892 to the present, because I think it's a very important book, and I can't wait for it to come out.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited about it. It's a book that's based on my dissertation, but it's substantially revised. And basically, I want to make an argument that and we continue to sort of narrate Black intellectual traditions by talking about the same Black men that we've always talked about, largely Booker T. Washington and W.E. Du Bois. But if you look, Black women were some of the first public intellectuals in our communities. And so when I started in the 1890s, I look at women like Angela Cooper, who is sort of more well-known now, but Fannie Barrier Williams emerged as this amazing thinker that we have largely overlooked as a thinker and social theorist. I talk about Mary Church Terrell, but I talk about her in the later part of her life when she's doing more kind of militant civil rights activism. I have a great chapter on Pauli Murray, who is a queer Black woman civil rights activist, and I talk about her concept of Jane Crow, and how, but also try to think about what it means that there are a lot of the silencing around her sort of amazing history of civil rights activism. She was silenced because she was a queer woman who, in the early part of her life, sort of identified as trans, but because there weren't technologies available for her to pursue that identity, became, chose to be lesbian in the later part of her life, or sort of situated herself there as the best kind of melding of queer identity that was available to her at the time.
I knew her.
Wow.
Yeah, I knew her.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we met in, I can't remember whether it was SNCC or CORE, but we met, and then I got to know her and stayed knowing. Yeah, she was fantastic. Go on.
Yeah, just amazing. So her, and then I talked, the book ends in the 1970s with me talking about legacies of civil rights and looking at revisiting Toni Cade Bambara, and basically just saying, when Black men tell the story of our history, it's a story about crisis, and it's a story about Black men not getting to be men. And when Black women tell the story about our history, it's a story about all of the things that we can be. There's always a sort of hopefulness to it, and there's always a deep commitment to making sure that the thinking that we're doing is accessible and makes practical changes in the community. And that's a story that we need to tell, and we need it now more than ever. So I'm hoping sometime 2015 it should be out.
Well, you promised to come back and talk more about it when the book is out and people can actually get their hands on it?
Absolutely. I will gladly do that.
That would be wonderful. Also, I should say, we are very proud that you are an alumna of the Women's Media Center Progressive Women's Voices program, aren't you?
Yes, I'm a very proud alumna of PWV and so proud of all the wonderful media work that my colleagues have been doing.
Thank you so much, Brittney, for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now let's dip into some news you can use. Two items this week. A jewel of a gift from wordsmith Rosalie Maggio, who is the author of Unspinning the Spin, which the Women's Media Center will release as its first book later this year. This is a website, www.quotationsbywomen.com, with some 43,000 quotations by some 6,500 women, almost all with sources, accessible either by women's last name, by keyword, or by 1,000 topic entries. The site is free and ad-free. It is amazing. It's a work of scholarship and love, and we're going to have Rosalie on the program shortly to discuss how she assembled this massive compendium. But I didn't see any reason for you to wait. You can enjoy yourself in the meanwhile by going to www.quotationsbywomen.com. The other news you can use is a new radio program, a sister program, Sex Trafficking Survivors United. It's Sex Trafficking Liberation Radio. And you can find it at www.sextraffickingsurvivorsunited.org. The first episode of this new survivor-led radio series aired on Pacifica Radio KPFT in March in Houston. Let's hope it goes Pacifica Network wide. Welcome to Sex Trafficking Survivors United. It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when I come back, it will be for a conversation with an unusual man who actually now gets it. Don't budge. We'll be back in just a moment with former President Jimmy Carter.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again. Women's Media Center Live has been from the first women's space, but it's also been a space where we've been trying to model an alternate media, what a truth-telling media for all people would be like. But it's been women's space because there's precious little women's space in contemporary media as it is. That said, I've said all along that when a situation came along where a male guest really warranted an invitation, we would welcome him. Well, this next guest is precisely that situation. Jimmy Carter was the 39th President of the United States, serving from 1977 to 1981. In 1982, he and his wife founded the Carter Center, a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of people around the world, and it has been remarkably effective. He has, in effect, invented the post-presidency. Carter was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002, and he's the author of more than 24 books. Nor is he afraid of controversy, as you will hear in the following conversation. I must say, I think he's a man who actually gets it. Feminism, that is.
Good morning. This is Jimmy Carter, Robin.
Good morning, Mr. President. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Well, it's good to be with you. Thank you very much.
Well, first, I have to convey to you a message from our mutual pal, Jane Fonda, who sends...
Oh, yeah, well,
she sends you...
I'm kind of halfway in love with her, as she knows.
Well, she sends you lots of love, and she says she is so proud of you for this book. Jane and Gloria Steinem and I are the co-founders of the Women's Media Center, which is the mother of this program.
I know that, and I'm very proud of you and grateful to you.
Oh, well, nothing compared to the gratitude we feel for you. Listen, this extraordinary book A Call to Action, Women, Religion, Violence, and Power. You write in it, quote, "The most serious and unaddressed worldwide challenge is the deprivation and abuse of women and girls." Good grief. We have been toiling in the vineyards on these issues for 40-odd years in the global women's movement, but only you could make David Letterman listen to women's suffering.
Well, I think it is more important than any war that's going on or any threat of conflict or any political deadlock that exists in the globe today. And it's been going on for a long time, and the problem is that leaders in the world don't know and don't want to know how bad the abuse of women and girls is, not only in other countries, but also in the United States.
That's very true. The worldwide audience in 110 countries for this program is comprised of mostly women and some men of conscience like yourself. But you're the first male guest ever to appear. You're the special circumstance. But this audience actually lives and knows the litany of issues, the FGM and sexual slavery and child marriage and forced marriage and honor killings. So this is one place you don't have to do the litany, and hopefully we can go deeper. I want to start with the issue of prostitution. The Carter Center's Mobilizing Faith for Women initiative urges, as one of its 21 points that you have in the book, adoption of the Nordic model on prostitution, which is the one that the global women's movement endorses too, prosecuting pimps and brothel owners and customers, but not the prostituted women. Say some more about that and why that's a human rights issue.
Well, this has been debated and tested for thousands of years, the subject of prostitution, and there's been a dramatic difference of opinion expressed through law in Sweden and also in the Netherlands, and now is being emulated by other countries. Sweden has taken the most enlightened and the most effective position by saying that the prostitutes, many of whom are involuntarily human sexual slaves, should not be prosecuted, but the prosecution should be focused on the brothel owners and the pimps and the male customers.
Exactly.
And this has been extremely effective by dramatically reducing the amount of prostitution in Sweden, but also particularly almost eliminating the involuntary servitude of girls who were brought into the slave trade. And when they've been tried in other countries in a different way, it has not worked. And now Germany and Iceland and other countries, including France now, is considering, also Canada is considering adopting the Swedish model, and that's what we should do in the United States, because in the United States there are 50 girls who are arrested in the United States for every one brothel owner or pimp or male customer. You
know that the European Parliament voted 3-1 for the Nordic model. But here's where we need advice from you, because you're a great figure on human rights. We are right at this moment fighting a battle with, of all places, Amnesty International, the great human rights organization, in which a very strong factor is pushing hard for the organization to take a position on decriminalizing not only the women, which we are for, but decriminalizing the pimps, quote, human rights, and not criminalizing the John. How do we deal with the cognitive dissonance that doesn't see that the buying and selling of a human being for sex is a violation of human rights?
Well, one thing I'd be glad to do is to issue a statement myself with your help and guidance on this subject, because it's inconceivable to me that Amnesty International or any other organization that respects human rights would endorse slave masters who buy young girls and put them into involuntary servitude to be sex slaves. And when they go and do this with brothel owners and pimps, then to me that directly violates the basic principles of human rights.
Oh, I will go anywhere to work with you on this. This would be so very important. Yes.
If you send me the information that Amnesty, or quote from Amnesty International, I'll write directly to Amnesty International. I'll also issue a public statement on the subject.
That would be just heaven. Thank you, sir. Okay, another question. I have limited time, so I have to really make the most of it. The Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women was signed under your direction as president, for which a belated thank you, by the way. But, of course, it has never been ratified by Congress, putting us in a category with Iran and Somalia. Talk about the difference it would make to have CEDAW ratified, and, for that matter, to finally have the Equal Rights Amendment put women in the Constitution?
Well, when China and other countries ratify this convention, which is basically a human rights statement, a declaration of human rights for women, then it's really an adverse reaction on our own country and a reflection on the integrity and wisdom of the U.S. Senate. One of the factors is that the Senate has right-wing members who won't approve anything that originates in the United Nations, and there are other, minor groups around the country who don't want to take any position between men and women on anything that relates to sex. So these are the things that we have to overcome in our country, and I hope that we continue this. I would really like to see the women's movement and the Carter Center and others reinitiate the effort to pass the Equal Rights Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Me too. I think it would make a huge difference. I mean, we sort of lost it by stealth last time around. But I think all of the things that they warned us against, have come to pass, and the world hasn't ended. Unisex bathrooms and women in the military. And so these are now de facto. So I don't know what the right wing would complain about. I'm sure they'd come up with something.
Well, they will. But, we just have to be able to confront them with the facts.
Yeah.
I don't think many people know that slavery exists as it does in the United States today, with 100,000 young girls sold into sexual slavery every year, according to the U.S. State Department.
Yes.
These things are not known, and the fact that sexual abuse against women on college campuses is rampant.
Yes.
And is concealed by college administrators. These things are not known, and I think when they do become known, there'll be a much more support publicly and otherwise for an equal rights amendment for women in general terms. We're
trying to get the word out. It's one reason why we started the Women's Media Center, because we realized that if we can't get it out through the media, then all the work we do is just spinning our wheels.
Of course, I understand that thoroughly, and not only in my family. Obviously, my wife is strongly supportive of this. My daughter Amy, and so forth, and we have a lot of granddaughters that are on board. So the whole Carter family, male and female, are fully supportive of what you all are doing.
Oh, thank you, sir. You write in the book about violence and religion as two of the main tools used to, suppress women. Let's talk about violence for a moment. You talk about the normalization of violence having a compounded effect on women, which of course it does. Talk about ways of separating the eroticizing of violence from a definition of manhood. I once wrote an entire book about that, but I still haven't figured out how to separate those two so that manhood isn't somehow confused in the minds of young boys with committing violence.
Well, I give three examples in general terms, plus some other smaller ones. One is that the United States is the foremost warmonger on earth. We have been to war unilaterally more than any other country in the world since the United Nations was formed, with about 30 different adventures involving military weapons in foreign countries. That's one thing. The second one is that we have now degenerated as a society into a strictly punishment society rather than a rehabilitation for those who commit crimes. Since I left the governor's mansion, for instance, we now have 7.5 times as many people in prison in America as any other country, as we did in those days, and we have more prisoners per capita and total than any other country on earth. And we have 8 times as many black women now in prison as we did when I left the White House. And these things are combined with the fact that America is the only country in this hemisphere, and the only country in NATO, obviously, that has a death penalty.
Exactly.
And this, again, derogates human life, and it gives kind of a carte blanche for people who want to abuse innocent people and not to treat them with the basic characteristics of compassion and concern that all religions teach.
Yeah. Do you think, because we're sort of an adolescent country, a relatively young country?
Well, we're backing away. I think we are now more committed to these kinds of crime than we were before. All the time I was governor and all the time I was president, the Supreme Court had put a moratorium on the death penalty, for instance. And when I was governor back in the 1970s, I competed with other governors throughout this nation in seeing who could have the smallest prison population of all.
Yeah.
And now, of course, the competition is who can have the most people.
Yeah, shocking. Wrong direction.
I know we're going in the wrong direction, so we're not getting better. We're getting worse. And as far as pay for women is concerned, it's now 23% less than men, and that's exactly the same level it was in the year 2000, about 15 years ago. So we're not making any progress on equality of pay, for instance.
There is a remarkable book that I would recommend to you, and it's not even one that you wrote or I wrote, so it must be really remarkable. It's by Valerie Hudson. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Sex and World Peace. She's the lead scholar of a team of scholars. It's
right.
They did a 12-year empirical study amassing enormous data that I think will be of use to the Carter Center. More than, I believe, 20 countries, proving that the most reliable arbiter of a state's aggressiveness or peacefulness is none of the factors that we've all previously believed. It's not civil society or natural resources or GDP or geopolitical situation. The most reliable arbiter of a state's aggressiveness or peacefulness is how it treats its women. So this is not only a matter of human rights and moral justice for women, but it's a matter of global security, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's no doubt, I quote in my book 2 United Nations Security Council resolutions that have passed and are binding on the United States. And they require that when peace talks are taking place between any two countries or involved in a civil war sponsored by the United Nations, the peace effort is, then women have to be involved. And that's something that everybody recognizes. I've been involved very deeply in Liberia, for instance, in South Sudan. And it was only when women got involved in the peace process that the men backed down and quit fighting each other.
1325, the resolution 13. But it isn't. Exactly, but it isn't always enforced. I mean, now it's got a little. No, it's not. A little more teeth.
It's not because men are still kind of in charge, and men don't want to admit that that women deserve a strong voice in establishing peace.
Well, how do we clone you? We have been longing for principled people of faith, given the way that religion is abused and used as a major tool against women. We have been longing for principled people of faith to speak out for a long time, and that you have come out with this book means more than I can tell you. The book is called A Call to Action, Women, Religion, Violence, and Power. The Carter Center can be reached at, tell me if I'm wrong, www.thecartercenter.org?
That's exactly right. And I hope everybody that believes in what the principles that you and I have just discussed will get in touch with us and let us form a phalanx of people who are working on the same issue.
It's a resource center. It initiates actions. The People of Faith initiative is remarkable, and it also will report on what people are doing. So call in and help them as well. Oh, exactly. Mr. President, thank you for this.
When I have a conflict in my Bible teaching and certain verses are selected to show that women are not equal to men, I always go back to what Jesus Christ did. He never said one word or committed one action that didn't exalt the status of women and girls. So that's why I believe that my faith is the foundation for what we're trying to do with equality. Thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking to you.
It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still, perhaps more so than ever, Robin Morgan. We'll be back in just a moment with Fighting Words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back just in time for Fighting Words. A few points as follow-up to the conversation with President Carter about Amnesty International and its pending position on prostitution and trafficking. First, the term sex work and sex workers, which AI uses, is likened by them to minors or foreign domestic workers. But prostitution is fundamentally different, of course. It's a bodily invasion, unlike any other form of labor. In most countries, for example, unemployment benefits require that recipients be willing to accept available work. Consider, as they actually had to do in Germany, whether this concept applies to prostitution. If we wouldn't require women to engage in available, quote, sex work as a condition of unemployment assistance, then prostitution is not like any other work. It's worth noting that the term sex work was coined by the sex industry and promulgated by them, and is not used anywhere in international law. It was picked up by well-meaning liberals who thought that they were expressing respect for the women, when actually the term expresses support for the industry from which the women are desperately trying to escape, or in which they are desperately trying to survive. Another point, choice versus harm. AI's language in the document confirms that while they consider human trafficking and child prostitution crimes, they regard, quote, sex between consenting adults in prostitution as harmless, since it is, quote, chosen. Yet what is the, quote, right to choose prostitution, their language, if one's alternative is dire poverty or a sexually violent, abusive home? It's illegal to sell your kidney in most countries, in recognition that legality would result in the systematic exploitation and harm of the most vulnerable population, who would sell their body parts in a desperate attempt to escape poverty. Among the documented harms of prostitution is the occurrence of post-traumatic stress at a higher rate than military combat. The issue is not choice. The issue is harm. Then there's history and context. Amnesty International once avoided the issue of FGM, terming female genital mutilation a cultural practice that was chosen, by girls and mothers, rather than a human rights violation. But we know that girls and mothers chose this because in FGM practicing communities, an uncut girl was unmarriageable or ostracized and doomed to begging or starvation. So under worldwide pressure for years, AI finally came to realize that such social forces are no excuse for FGM, which, like prostitution, causes great harm to the girls and women who may choose or seem to choose to subject themselves to it. Again, the issue is harm, not choice. The human rights movement recognizes debt bondage as a human rights violation for children and adults both, yet adults choose debt bondage as the best of bad choices, or as the only choice. Does that make debt bondage a human right rather than a human rights violation, or is Amnesty International going to endorse the right to be exploited in prostitution? Having admittedly consulted only with the sex industry-sponsored International Sex Workers Union, but not hearing testimony from the large numbers of survivors who have been appealing to be heard, AI UK has responded to criticism by emphasizing that some women sell themselves in prostitution. It's not only pimps who are culpable. Well, true. And we have all seen outrageous stories of UN personnel trading food for sex, often to young girls. Does it really matter whether these girls are 17 or 19? Aptly called survival sex, these transactions can hardly be represented as an example of free will, though technically they might be called consensual. Simply put, all prostitution is forced. Last, it would be the hope of the global women's movement that AI would not only abandon this regressive path, but would in fact come out clearly with a strong position on the positive side, to wit, that prostitution is a form of sexual exploitation which constitutes a violation of human rights. That's simple. We would expect such an organization to lead the effort to recognize this, not obstruct it. If you feel like dropping an email or a note to Amnesty International, either to their website or their international offices or their Facebook page, it would be really important. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio, WJFK 1580 AM, or visiting us at WMClive.com for this or for a whole rich archive of all our previous episodes. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, Senior Producer, Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thank you for being with us. Join us next week when we'll welcome a rare woman boxing manager, a best-selling novelist, and a scientific researcher with new findings about institutional betrayal. All this and more, only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMClive.com. Talk radio with a brain.